Hey everybody, we're here for part two of Empowered Visionary School Leadership. Today we're going to be talking about the art of coaching. Are you excited? You ready? Okay, part two. Make sure you have your workbook with you. There are lots and lots of pause and write prompts throughout our time together today and through all the webinars. And that workbook has all of the places for you to put in your thoughts and your feelings and your ideas and your dreams. All right, so make sure you have that with you. Have some water, some snacks close by, and settle in. Take a moment. Make all your distractions and all your notifications be quiet for a minute so that you can focus up. All right, here we go. So today, during the art of coaching, this part two, we're going to talk about what does a kind, compassionate, and respectful community even look like? How would you describe it? What do you hope for? What would you envision it as? What would it look like? What have you experienced before, and what do you hope to cultivate in the program that you're leading right now? Okay. Next, we'll talk about our non-negotiables, our straight up, nope, no way, I won't have that. It's important to know what are our non-negotiables so we know what our negotiables are, right? Okay, so we're going to talk about that. And then we'll talk about the 4 agreements. Don Miguel Ruiz work on the 4 agreements and how you might take that and utilize some of the concepts of that to weave into your current school culture, your program culture, and for your own self as a leader. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll go into the 3 C's of coaching, some concrete things that you can use and say and concepts to keep in mind as you enter in and continue to create a culture of coaching with people that you lead that is relevant and helpful and respectful and kind and clear. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk a little bit about reflective supervision. What does that look like? So it's a full episode this time. So get ready and we're off. Okay, so let's do a quick check-in. So you've already watched the first webinar of the series, and in that we talked about vision and mission, core values, and more, some ways that we sabotage our own leadership, some points to remember as you develop your leadership style and your leadership practice. So we've done all that. So let's take a beat or two and just do a quick check-in to get us back into the vibe of Empowered. So find your pause button and hit pause and write down, what is it that you've been thinking about? Is there something that you put into place that worked? Is there, oh yeah, oops, I want to do that. I hadn't done that yet, but circle, highlight, stars, arrows to put down on paper that's your intention to do and to continue to do this work. All right. So find your pause button, hit pause, and when you're ready, come on back. Okay, here's our big question, our first opening question, and it's, what does a kind, compassionate, respectful community look like? What does it even look like? What words would you use to describe it? Have you been in a workplace environment where the community felt like there was a deep sense of respect and that there was authentic compassion, and that the people that you worked alongside had mutual respect and thoughtfulness and awareness of each other? All right, so let's do that. So think about a time when you were in an organization or a program or a school where you were working in that you had a community that you would say, yeah, I consider this to be kind and compassionate, respectful. Communication was on point. It was clear. It was clear. Communication was a given, right? Let's see, tell about a time also when in that community there was conflict or maybe there was an absence of compassion or collaboration. So think about those 2 different dynamics. What's the ideal, and then what's kind of the not ideal? Well, what do you wish would have happened in the not so great community? What did you learn by being in that community that wasn't working as well as you'd like? And what would you and what could you have done differently? Okay, those are two big chunks. So find your pause button, and yeah, we'll come back shortly. Okay, now we're back. So now we have an idea of what we're hoping to create, and then what we definitely do not want to replicate, right? So with that in mind, and kind of in that place, I'd like for you to think back again about a leader that you worked with before that was your favorite. What words would you use to describe your favorite boss, your favorite leader, your favorite person in a position of power that you felt, okay, this works really great. That person knows what they're doing. They've taken a lot of classes, and they are inherently authentic, and it feels good, and it feels like an honor to work alongside them. Okay, you probably have somebody who came to mind right away. So hold on to the image of that person, and know that we're going to come back to that later. But we're going to pause again and give you the opportunity to write down that person's name, and the words that you would use to describe them. Now, remember in the first episode, we were talking about Simon Sinek's idea of your why. What is your why? And to find a friend and find out why you're even friends with them, right? And that goosebump feeling that you get when they describe what it is about you that makes them want to be your friend, or makes your friendship worthy and valuable to them. So you might keep that in mind as you're thinking about the person that you worked with, that you've got in mind for this particular prompt, right? Maybe could you articulate what their why was, right? Okay, so find your pause button, and we're going to write again. And when you're finished writing and you've gotten all that down, come on back. Okay, so now we're back. You've got a picture in your head. Maybe you've made a note to yourself to reach out to that person who was your favorite boss or your favorite leader. And maybe you've made a note to write them a note. If they're still around and you still know how to reach out and contact them, let them know. I could tell you from personal experience that I've done that and reached out to someone, a mentor of mine, a favorite boss of mine, and said, hey, and her name is Mary. I reached out to her and said, hey, I was creating this workshop and creating this webinar, and I thought of you, and it was awesome. So I encourage you to do that. It's powerful to receive those messages, and it's also powerful to write a note of gratitude about that too. Okay, that's a little thought bubble action item for you. Okay, so now back to our non-negotiables. Our nope, no way, did not like that. I don't, I'll have none of that. Now, each of us have our own things that we won't stand for. We won't let that ride, right? So what are the things that you would say, yeah, no, that's a no-go for me. I won't let that stand. As a leader, this is something that we can't have happen here. Very much as like in the classroom, when we say to children, I won't let you hit, right? Hitting is a non-negotiable, right? So think about, in your role as a leader, what are your non-negotiables? And yeah, let's just put those down on paper so you have time to pause and think about those for yourself, okay? So find the pause button again and put your thoughts down on paper. Okay, now we're back. Take a deep breath. That was a lot of writing, I know. It's true. It's true. There's a lot of self-reflection in this series, right? It's part of what makes it set 3, is that I'm here to give you some guidance and some prompt questions to help you think about what works for you, weaving in some ideas of what has worked best and worked well for leaders all around the world, okay? So yes, it's a lot of writing. You can do it. So deep breath. Maybe relax your hands. And now we're going to step into Don Miguel Ruiz's work, The 4 Agreements. If you don't have this book, I recommend it. It's super short. It's not a novel, so don't be intimidated by it, but it's really packed with important, inspirational leadership guidance, right? So check it out. We're going to go into the 4 different agreements in a brief way, and I hope that you're encouraged to get the book for yourself and take a look at, how can I weave this into how I already lead, or the culture that we're already cultivating in my own program or in my own school. Okay, so let's start with number 1, the first of the 4 agreements. Number 1 is be impeccable with your word. Now, before we go forward too much more, I wanted to tell you a story right quick. So my best friend, a leader of an organization in Atlanta, had got this book, and she and the other leaders in the organization were really inspired by it, and they get this, they wove it into their process for hiring. They also wove it into their process for giving feedback, their annual appraisals, evals, and they use the 4 agreements to tap back into to see, are you committed to each of these 4 agreements as you enter into our organization? Are you continuing to be committed to these as your work progresses over the year or 2 or 3 or 4 years here with the organization? How does this play out in your work, in the studio, in the classroom, in your work with children? And from my own observation as a leader, here's how I see it playing out in your work, right? So that might be an idea that you want to consider. How could you use these 4 agreements to develop those initial interview questions to find out, are they going to be impeccable with their word? What would that look like? How have they done that before? And so on. So check it out. Let's dive in. Number 1, be impeccable with your word. So the high points in this are this. 1 is to speak with integrity, right? Sometimes it's really hard to say the honest thing, right? If someone asks you, did somebody tell you about that? Or did somebody tell you to call me in or to call me about this? And maybe you don't want to share who said what, but that integrity of saying, yes, someone did. I mean, just at that moment, being vulnerable to speak with integrity and to say what is true, even if the truth might be difficult to hear, is so important. And even though in that moment it might be hard for the person to hear and hard for us to say, it sets the tone that I'm going to be here and you can trust and rely on me to not tell you when something is sideways or when something's going really well too, right? So speaking with integrity is one of the first points of being impeccable with your word. Next is say only what you mean, right? Sometimes that includes a pause, right? So a pause in a conversation, 1, can be powerful because it brings the intention and attention to you and to what it is that you're about to say. And it creates a culture that you were thoughtful, right? And I'm going to pause and say what I mean. I'm going to consider, what is it that I mean? I'm going to consider, is this a story that I've made up for myself that's fiction? Is it coming from a place of honesty and truth and integrity? And I want to underline the truth part, so that we're not speaking from a place of this story that we've made up in our head that often is fiction based on our own experiences that may not be the experiences of the here and now, right? Okay, so say what you mean. Next, avoid using words or actions to speak against yourself or to gossip about others. And that could be difficult because we could be a part of that by being the person to speak first in a way that's gossipy or in a negative light about others. Or we can be the person who overhears or the person who receives that from others, right? So that can be a tricky one. So Being impeccable with our word is also being mindful of the words and the phrases and the delivery that we use to talk about either ourselves or others, right? Next, use the power of your words in the direction of truth and love, right? So there are all sorts of ways that we can handle those circumstances where we, as a leader, we can role model this and all of the agreements, and we can encourage others in a way that's not shamey or blamey, but encourages them to step into their own integrity with their words and their own dedication to being impeccable with their words, and encouraging them to use the power of their words in the direction of truth and love, right? I would add respect to this too. Okay, so number 2, the second agreement, and it's don't take anything personally. Boy, is that hard when we are in the work that is so heart forward and the work that we do is so personal. The power of working with young children and the adults that work with young children can really be close to our emotions, right? So this agreement can be hard because we got to remember, let's look at the points that Don Miguel talked about, right? So nothing others do or say is because of you. Let that just land. It's not. It may be delivered in a way that what is happening and what they feel and what they think is your fault, right? So if we're leaning into this second agreement, okay, that's coming from a place of emotion. That's coming from a place of big frustration or anger or disappointment or sadness or whatever the core emotion behind that conversation is. Know that you are absolutely in relationship with that, but it's not necessarily because of you as a person. What others say and do is a projection of their own reality, right? Their own story that they've made up for themselves to figure out what is happening in the here and now, right? Brene Brown talks about that, and the trickiness of the stories that we tell ourselves, right? So get this, when something happens, a circumstance happens, and we don't quite know exactly all of the details, all of the information, or the context, we as humans try to figure it out by making a story about it. And what we'll do is the pieces that we don't know for real and for truth, we make up stuff to fill in the blanks, to make it make sense, and to make it match what our past experiences have been, right? So every time something happens and it is in agreement with the story that we've made up, our brain actually gets a shot of yes, hormones, and so we continue that pattern, right? It's like, see, I knew it. I knew that person would say that. Yep, I knew that parent was going to call. I knew that was going to happen, right? And that is feel good. So that perpetuates that story that we've made up, which is most often fiction, right? So it's important to, this particular agreement is important to make sure that we test and we retest and question those stories that we make up to make sense of things, to see, is that true? Is that a projection of my own reality, right? It's true that my own reality is my reality, informed by my own experiences, which makes that process difficult to take a look at it and go, wait, is that really what happened? Is that really what's going on? Wait, I don't think so. Or maybe it is. That part of the work is difficult. So I'm not going to fib to you and say that it's easy. It gets easier once you begin to question more and more of those dialogues in our head, stories in our head, circumstances in our head. It gets easier. It is. And we begin to shake out of stories that just are not true. Okay, so next. Don Miguel continues and says, when you are immune to the opinions and actions of others, you won't experience needless suffering. Hooray. Doesn't that sound great? Now, when we're immune to the often emotionally charged opinions and actions of others, we can exist in a space that has less suffering for sure. And we also want to be mindful of, that is their reality, that is their experience. So as a leader, how can I show up to help them understand and take a look at the story that they've made up for themselves? Vulnerable, bold, brave work to do for sure, right? So consider this in your next handful of conversations that might be difficult with folks that you work with, right? Is this a place to begin to look at the stories that you say to yourself and the stories that others are saying to themselves, right? Okay, the third agreement, and this one is don't make assumptions, right? Okay, so pull up and find that courage to ask the questions and to express what it is that you really want, right? What it is that you really see, right? So communicate with others as clearly as you can to avoid misunderstandings and sadness and drama, right? So I notice, and then say what it is that you notice. I'm curious about, and then say what you're curious about to get at what is real and true instead, and get around assumptions that you might make, right? So for example, you might say, I notice, and then you make an assumption as to the why without being curious about context and truth of what is actually happening, right? So that's how we can dive into the assumptions by accident, right? If we don't follow up that I notice with an I'm curious or I wonder about or tell me more about, right? That gets away from the assumption and gets to what is for real, right? Okay, so with this, just this one agreement, Don Miguel says that you can experience a huge impact, right? When you get around assumptions, when you get at what is for real, what's true. Okay, number 4 of the agreements is this: always do your best, right? So this is true that our best is going to change from moment to moment, day to day, based on, okay, am I healthy? Am I getting my primary needs met? When I'm healthy and I'm rested and I feel peaceful, I'm going to be on my A game, right? We're human. And we will have days when we're not on our A game, but we're kind of on our B game. Okay, so self-reflection. I'm going to pause. I'm going to take a break. I need some time off. I need some time away, or I need to walk around the block, or I need to pause and go to the bathroom and wash my face and come back, right? So consider all of the times when we are feeling dysregulated, and one, what is it that you do to come back to regulation? So that, and are you practicing that, right? So that when when circumstances show themselves to you and you need to bring that A game, you can do that, right? You're healthy, rested, peaceful, right? Okay, so next, under any circumstances, simply do your best, right? Give yourself grace and hold yourself accountable. Right? So think about the idea of being friendly with error, right? I'm human. I'm going to make a mistake. I'm going to forget that follow-up email. I'm going to drop the ball on, buying snack and having it available the next morning. All of the tiny details that we may be responsible for, and all the big details we may be responsible for, and we might miss it, or we might misunderstand, or we will make a mistake, right? So, and that's part of being human. So giving ourselves the grace to make a mistake and the friendliness with that error can bring about a tremendous growth, right? So that's part of always doing your best, is being friendly with error and knowing, okay, I made an error because I'm human. What can I do to repair? What can I do to make it better? How can I do it differently next time? What is my commitment to doing it differently next time, right? So that's the piece of holding yourself accountable, right? So now it's time to pause and write. All right, so let's see. Find your workbook, and you'll see the section in there for the 4 agreements, and it's got them written down there. So take this time to pause, pen to paper, and how might you use these concepts on your team, right? Maybe you're inspired by my best friend Dana, and you want to weave that into the interview process. What kind of interview questions could you use to get at about how they handle doing their best? How do they regulate when they're not doing their best? How do they come back to their A game, right? What about assumptions? How do they handle that? What about taking things personally? What about the impeccable nature of their word? What kind of questions might you ask to get at that? Or how might you use it to do some professional development or have conversations with your team about the 4 agreements? Is it something that you could be inspired by integrating into the culture of your own community right now? And what would that look like? So it's a big question. So take a pause, go get some water if you need to, and when you're finished, hit play again, and I'll be right here. Okay, now we're back. If you haven't had the opportunity to move, or you didn't get up from your seat, take a moment now to just move your body, and I'm going to do the same thing and just give a little stretch here and there. Feel free to stand up and spin like this little one here. That could feel really good. Nurturing our P&V, our proprioception and our vestibular sense. Don't forget that. All right, let's carry on. Okay. So in speaking about emotional intelligence, we want to consider this, right? So when we're moving into those relationships and we're moving toward coaching the folks that we work alongside, these are some things to keep on top of mind, right? So 1, approach conflict head on. Now, it may be that you're like me, and at a particular point in my career, I did not want conflict, right? You might remember from the first episode, I was the glitter lady. Yeah, so conflict was not something that I wanted to enter into. Not a lot of people are automatically comfortable with conflict. And some of us may have had experiences growing up. We had lots of practice with it, so we got really good at it. So great. So think about, what topics am I hesitant to talk about? Or what topics do I tend to procrastinate and not have that conversation that I know is important to have with someone on my team or a family in our community? So those are important to know about, right? What are the topics that you are hesitant about? And next, something to remember, foster growth through acceptance, right? So throughout this episode in particular, but all of them, how we show up as a leader and our work and our role modeling of all sorts of different qualities that we want to see in our team, really important. So how are we doing that? Think about fostering growth through acceptance. How do we role model that, right? We can role model that through who we hire, right? Take a look at your team, and is it a diverse representation? Do you have lots of different perspectives and voices and opinions and experiences, right? So hire that, hire and promote. Is there a place for people to learn and grow and move into different roles? Are you giving opportunities to everyone to grow and gain the skills to move into a higher, into a different role, maybe with greater responsibility, right? Okay. And next, give voice to all sorts of people. So in the classroom, we have books about all sorts of people. We have families from all different kinds of backgrounds. So How does the school represent that, right? Okay, next, communicate better by listening more. The power of the pause is incredible. The pause that is engaged, the pause that allows the person to continue their thought, right? So think about a conversation that you've had with someone that went really well, and what was the use of pause and the use of silence, right? You might be having a conversation with somebody, and maybe it's really emotionally activated, and the person doesn't try to fix it or doesn't try to tell us what to do, but there's a silence, but they're not there. They're present and engaged. So often a slight tilt of the head and a small nod, or yeah, that sounds really hard. Tell me more. In between those moments of silence gives that person the permission and the space to fully tell their full story. Okay, so the power of silence and the engaged pause. Next, expect mistakes because we're human. We've talked about this briefly before, but be friendly with error, with our own and with others. Others are going to make errors. Is there a place for additional training or additional support, or some idea generating? Maybe, probably, most likely. So that's part of what we do. That's part of how we help children learn and grow. When they drop a tray or when they put their coat on upside down, they're still learning, right? So we either teach into that skill or give opportunity to right themselves, right? Same can be said as a leader. How does that unfold, and how do you see that in your role as a leader? Expecting mistakes and allowing a friendliness with that error, and allowing the space and the autonomy to right it if they can. Okay. Okay, another reminder to stretch. All right, now it's time. We're going to talk a little bit about the coaching, different coaching models, right? And different ways that you can observe, coach, give feedback, etc. So I tend to lean into the reflective practice model, where you give individuals the opportunity to self-reflect and to take a look at their own work from a place of honesty and vulnerability too. Is this a place where I could grow? Is this a place where I'm really struggling? This is a place that's my strength. Got this one. Is this a place where I can mentor another person? Right, those kinds of self-reflection opportunities can be incredibly powerful for your team, right? So there's a difference between self-reflection versus correction, right? Self-reflection gives the person you're coaching or you're leading an opportunity to take a look at their own work, right? And decide, how can I do differently? How can I do better? How do I want to do better, right? What do I need to do better, right? Versus correction, where a person in the position of leader comes in and says, do this. Don't do that. Don't do that. Do this instead. Okay, that's cool. And sometimes if it's a safety thing, then yeah. But most of the time, is there a place where you can pause instead of telling what to do? Maybe you role model or you show what to do, and then encourage and cultivate a self-reflection to, oh, I saw you do that. I'm going to try to do that too. Wonder what it would look like if you did that, or if that happened, right? And let the answer and the coaching really come from within that person, that self-reflection. Okay, so if we go into what are the roles of the coach and what is the role of the person receiving coaching, the leader, let's just talk about what is the role anyway. So if you're thinking about the role of a coach, it's this. It's to provide a supportive and encouraging environment in which the learner and the coach jointly reflect on current practices and purpose. What do we see? What do you see? What do I see? In an environment that's supportive, is encouraging, is friendly with error, right? And figuring out how can we move forward on the practices that I do in my classroom right now and be more deeply connected to my purpose. So that's a part of the role of a coach, but there's more. So also the role of the coach is to offer respectful, clear feedback when new skills and new competencies are being tried out. They're being applied. They're problem-solving situations together is another role of the coach, right? It could be that you have someone that works with you that just wants you to tell them what to do. And sometimes that could be helpful. But that gifted coach can ask the question so that the answer comes from within. More often than not, people who are in coaching have the answer. They just don't have the confidence to know that they know, right? And sometimes when you know that you need to learn more information and practice more skills, that's an important pivotal piece. And that's the self-reflection, right? So, and offering that respectful, clear feedback is super helpful and is the role of a coach. This is what I see. This is what I notice, right? Together, problem solve those challenging situations together. So they know they're not alone. The answer comes from within, but they're in the presence of somebody who believes that that can happen and will happen when given the space and the time to do that. We might nudge, offer prompts, or offer curiosities or questions so that together we get at what it is, what is the solution, right? Okay, so now let's look at the role of the learner, the person receiving coaching. So the role here looks like this. Their role is to find their confidence and to feel like they're capable, right? Oftentimes when we're in a coaching relationship with a teacher or another staff member in direct work with children, there could be a blow to their confidence happening, or they feel like, why is my classroom out of control? I've been a teacher for 10 years, for 20 years, and their confidence is shaken, right? So the role of the learner is to find that confidence again and to remember that they are capable. And the role of the coach is to assist in movement toward that confidence and that knowledge of their abilities, right? Next, the role of the learner is to engage in self-reflection. Okay, and man, bold, vulnerable work for sure, right? I'm going to take a look at, what do I do? How do I do it? Can I do it differently? I don't want to look at that because I'm embarrassed. I don't, my confidence is shaken. So many things can prevent the ease of moving into self-reflection. So that's where coaching comes in to point those places out. Yeah. Okay, next role of the learner is to practice that self-correction, to actually put into place the new skills or new strategies that they believe, let's see, or they're considering, is this going to work? Let me try it out. I'm going to practice it. I'm going to put it into practice and try it out, right? This reminds me of in some recent brain research that I've just learned about, which is super exciting to me. But the one way that the adult brain works is that when you learn a new skill or are shaping a new perspective, it's important to put it into action right away, like within 20 minutes, right? And you can put it into action by writing about it, by telling somebody about it, or doing it in your classroom or in your life in general, right away. So 20 minutes, and you can anticipate that for the long term, you're going to be able to have very successful recall of that information or that new skill, right? So if you wait a day or so before you put it into practice, you try that new technique, that new skill, right? If you wait a couple days, then your percentage of successful recall in the long term becomes smaller. So it goes down to like 80%, right? Then if you wait a week or more, it goes down even less, like to 50, 60%. And if you wait a couple weeks to put into play that new skill or new technique or new correction, then you more often are thinking to yourself, wait, what? What was that thing? I can't remember. So adult brains, amazing. So when you put something into play right away, then you're setting yourself up for long-term recall of that information, right? Okay. The next role for the learner is to feel connected to their purpose. What is their work that they're doing? Why are they doing it? What impact does it have in the world? I feel connected to this work, therefore I am worthy of receiving and learning and growing alongside a coach who respects me and believes in me, right? Connected to purpose. So I learned recently that the connection to purpose is something that's incredibly important to the younger, newer teachers that are entering into into the workforce. What is the purpose? What impact am I going to have? Does this make any difference in the world? That's really important. So as you're thinking about how you're managing across different generations, know that that's something that typically leaders are finding that younger people coming into the workforce find incredibly important and can sometimes be a deal breaker if they stay with a job, organization, a business, a school, or they leave. Am I connected to purpose? So let's see. So now it's time to pause and write. Let's see, where are we? Okay, here. So here it is. My question for you is to write about what you think about the role of the coach and the learner. What have you seen? What do you see happening right now? And in your position as the coach, what does it look like? How often do you offer feedback? What does it look like? Is it brief, or is it you just meet once a year? How often do you meet with folks to see how's it going? What do you need? What does support look like? All of that, okay? So think about, what do you do now, and what might you do differently now that you have another idea of what the role of the coach and what the role of the learner is. Okay, so I'll be quiet a moment. You push pause and do your writing, and when you're ready, hit play again, and we'll carry on. Okay, now we're back. Deep breath. Okay, now we know what the role of the coach and role of the learner is, what your ideal would be, where you want to go as a coach, and understand what's your understanding of the roles, the different roles of coach and learner. Now let's talk about some tools that you can use in your position as the coach. So 3 C's, kind of easy to remember. So here they are. So the first one is to connect. The second one is to communicate, and the third one is to collaborate. Okay, so let's go back and let's talk about connect for a second. Okay, so connect is making the time and realizing the importance of having a connection with the people that you lead, the people that you're in a coaching relationship with, finding out what is important to them. How do they see their work having an impact on the world? What is their purpose, right? So the bigger connection questions is something that you use to develop that relationship, right? To develop trust and to develop a mutual respect and regard with each other. Believing and letting them know that the work that they do has incredible importance in a way that is true and authentic, right? You're communicating that in a way that's authentic, right? So we can talk kind of a little thought bubble over here, you know, using a descriptive praise and feedback versus evaluative praise and feedback. I have a whole class about that and how we describe or we evaluate when we offer praise to children. We're not going to go into that now because y'all probably know all that. So be mindful. How do you give that feedback in your relationship building with the people that you lead? So back to connect, finding out what's on their mind, what's top of mind right now, what's your biggest struggle right now, what would you like to talk about now, finding out from their perspective what they believe to be their area that they need to grow, right? That's first. Connect. Next, communicate. I notice, I'm curious about, or I wonder about. Those are really helpful helpful questions to ask, helpful phrases to use, right? So finding out, I notice, I wonder what would happen if, come from a place of curiosity, right? So you're going to find out, what do I see? Is it true? Or is it a kind of a skewed idea of what I think is happening? Do I have evidence to support the feedback that I want to give, right? I notice, is it true in what you're saying, right? I notice, and then tell the thing that is true. What is it that you see, right? Without judgment or lots of adjectives, just what do you see, right? And then the next, lean into curiosity to communicate, right? What would happen if you did this? I wondered about, I'm curious about, and then fill in the blanks, right? So it comes across in a way that is supportive with an idea, and then the decision for that idea can come from the person you're coaching, right? Okay. Oh, something I remembered that I wanted to mention about connect. So I'm going to go back just a little bit. Okay. So let's go back to connect for a moment. So the what's on your mind piece and making that connection with the people we're in a coaching relationship with, right? So this is kind of the time where you ask those follow-up questions to encourage that self-reflection that we talked about just a bit ago, right? So yes, first ask what's on their mind, but ask those follow-up questions like, what did you figure out about, and then you can tap backwards into what they, maybe an earlier coaching conversation or another problem that was able to be solved through coaching. So kind of the check-in of, what did you figure out about such and such? How did that work when you moved that shelf? How did that work? How did that conversation with that parent go, or with your co-teacher? Right. So that lets them know that you're interested and you remember that what they've been working on already, right? In this time, it's also important to remember to give that quiet time for reflection, for the connection and the communication questions, right? So you ask the question, or you say the notice, say what you notice, and then pause, right? We talked about that just a moment ago, right? That gives that person a beat or two or more to consider. What did you say? What do I think about it? What do I know about it? What do I want to say, or what do I want to do? And then the doing of the thing, or the saying of the thought. You see what I'm saying? So give some time for processing. Oftentimes in that coaching learner conversation, there can be kind of a dynamic like this, you know what I mean? So by offering that pause and giving time to process information and process that language, it evens it out a little more. Do you know what I mean? Right? So you're giving space and time for them to pull their thoughts together, right? And to even consider and even reconsider what they were going to say or do in the first place, right? So that engaged pause can be very powerful to engage the other person, right? Okay, so now let's talk about the final C here, and that's the C of collaboration. What's the plan? So you figured out what's going on, what's on their mind, what's the biggest struggle. Here's what you notice. Here are your curiosities, your wonderings, and now what would you like to do? What's your plan? What's your goal for the week, right? What's your victory? What's your obstacle? What's your technique? What's your emotion? We'll get into that in another episode too, but I'll give you the brief bit here. So VOTE, vote. This is helpful in creating goals, right? So V is the victory. What is it that you want, right? I want this child to stop flipping tables. I want my co-teacher to be engaged during the gathering. I want, what's the victory? What do you want? And then the O is the obstacle. What is getting in the way? What's keeping you from getting at the V, at the victory, right? And T is the tools and techniques. What tools do I need? What techniques do I need to get over the obstacle to achieve the victory that I'm looking forward to, right? And the E, the final E in vote, is emotions. How do I feel about the whole thing? I feel frustrated right now, but I anticipate feeling relieved or contentment or happiness, whatever. You see what I'm saying? So in making the plan in a collaborative way, you can ask the questions. V, what is it that you want? O, what's keeping you from getting that? What do you need to do that? And how do you feel about the thing? Right? Those are helpful questions to ask so that you can coach someone to come up with a plan, right? Deep breath. Okay. Now we're going to talk about difficult conversations. Nobody wants to do this, but sometimes they happen, right? So let's talk about what to keep in your mind as you're entering in that difficult conversation. Okay. 1, deliver with love. I also want to add deliver with respect and deliver with clarity, right? Another Brene Brown tip of the hat, clear is kind, unclear is unkind, right? So in your role as a leader, we want to be kind. So let us be clear, right? Deliver with clarity, with love, with respect, right? Next, sometimes we've talked about when we're talking about, okay, I'm going to have a family or a conference with my child's important people, family, guardian, and such. So I'm going to say what works, what they're doing really well, and then what they're not doing really well, and then what they're doing well. So, and it's called a poop sandwich. You all ever heard of that? Poop sandwich? Well, in a leadership role, maybe in conversations with families, we could talk about that another time. But a poo sandwich is just that. It's poo. So it just doesn't really work. So when you're having those conversations, and you are calling someone in to have a conversation, and maybe it's going to be a difficult conversation. They know it's going to be something's up. Why are you calling me into your office? Why do you say, hey, can we check in later? What does that mean? What are you going to tell me? It's going to be poop. So don't put it in a sandwich. Just tell me what the deal is. So poo sandwich doesn't really work. When you're in that conversation and you know in that conversation you've got to deliver news that's not so great, take out the emotion and just lay it out. Don't belabor it, right? When delivering good news, infuse it with emotion. Now, when you're delivering that bad news and you hear me say, take out the emotion, know that I don't mean flat, but I mean, are you regulated? When you have that conversation, check in with yourself. Am I jacked up? Do I feel tightness in my face? Do I feel tightness in my shoulders? Do I feel fidgety? Do I feel nervous, right? Am I dysregulated? What can I do to regulate? I can put both feet flat on the ground. Do I have water close by? Have I gone to the bathroom? Am I taking deep breaths? Am I sitting in a chair that's comfortable? Are they sitting in a chair that's comfortable? Have I put something in between us, or is it an open space between us? Right? Being mindful of how you set up the space to deliver to have difficult conversations is super important. Just like you prepare the space in your classroom, you're going to prepare the space in your office or wherever it is that you're going to have the difficult conversation, so that you can be regulated and they have the space to regulate as well. Okay, so take out the emotion. Don't be flat. but just lay it out. Don't belabor it. When delivering good news, infuse it with emotion. So here's some words that you can use, right? Hey, I need to give you some difficult news. I have to give you some feedback, and it's going to be difficult to hear, but I need to tell you, and then tell it, right? More often than not, people will know that this is going to be a difficult conversation, or there's going to be news that they don't want to hear necessarily. So get to the point. Hey, I need to give you some difficult news. I have to give you some feedback that's going to be difficult to hear, or that might be hard to hear, but I need to tell you. That is coming from a place of respect. I respect you enough to tell you about the thing so that we can figure out what we can do together, right? Like, boom, here it is. Given in a way with kindness in your voice, openness in your body, and clarity with what you're saying is key in developing a relationship of trust, among other things. But this is one way that people can believe what we say and know that we're impeccable with our word. Sound familiar? Yeah. So straight up, boom, there it is. There's lots more that we could talk about in having those difficult conversations, for sure. But for today and for this webinar, thinking about those things, those points to remember, and the important things to say, how to begin that conversation, remaining open and honest, getting right to the point, coming to a solution. You're connecting, you're communicating, you're collaborating already. Imagine what those 3 C's look like during that difficult conversation. Making the connection, you're communicating clearly, right? How might that sound in a difficult conversation that I notice and I wonder, right? You're letting them know you're connecting to say, I've got some hard news, and I gotta let you know, and then say it, right? Followed up with, what's the plan, right? What are the steps going forward? So here we are now. We're about to stop and write again. So think about that conversation that you've got on your mind that maybe you're avoiding, or maybe you don't want to have, or maybe it's a conversation that you've had to have frequently. Maybe it's a particular conversation with families that often creep up 2 or 3 times a year, or with colleagues frequently. You might not have a situation right here, right now, but think of one that, oh yeah, I've had to have that conversation before, and that's one that comes up frequently. So think about that. Or you might have one that you need to have in the next week or so, okay? So use this time, use this opportunity to get your thoughts together, okay? So what's that conversation that you need to have? So put that on your mind, put that in your mind, and we're about to put pen to paper to write about it. So what's that conversation that's just hanging out there? Write down preparation of the space. Where will it happen? What do you do to get yourself ready, right? What are your steps to regulate? How are you going to make that happen during the difficult conversation? When emotions come up for you or for the other person, what are your regulation techniques that you can use for yourself, right? How are you going to connect? How are you going to communicate? And how are you going to collaborate? Okay, so I'm going to be quiet, hit pause, write that all down, and then when you're ready, we'll come back. Okay, now we're back. Here's some points to I know that was hard, wasn't it? Not all the answers are there. It's all right. Think about the work that we've done from the first episode through the episode until now, and we've got 3 more that will help inform you and help give you some ideas to prepare for that difficult conversation as well. Okay. I do, though, want to encourage you, once you've got a conversation that you know you need to have, give yourself a deadline, a date, and tell somebody that you trust, somebody on your Square Squad or a mentor of yours, and say, hey, I'm taking this webinar and we're talking about difficult conversations, and I need to have this conversation. I'm going to have it by Wednesday. Will you call me on Wednesday or send me a text on Wednesday afternoon and say, hey, did you have that conversation? So helpful. So helpful. They don't need to know all the details. Just, hey, Wednesday afternoon, send me a text. Hey, Amy, did you do the thing? And I'll say yes or no. Hopefully you'll say yes. Okay. So going forward, let's remember, here are some things to remember in coaching and in having hard conversations. One, focus on what's working well first, right? What is working? Now, this is different from the poop sandwich, right? This is what's working well in your relationship building, not during the difficult conversation part, conversation, right? But in general, as a coach and building that relationship with the people that you lead, you're going to focus on what's working well, right? What are their strengths? Leaning into their strengths, creating a space for them to put their strengths into action, right? Next, allow mistakes to happen so that people can figure them out. That pause we talked about is a great way to allow the person to figure out, oh, whoops, 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 and figure out how to write it, how to write themselves, how to figure it out, right? A good question to ask is, would you like an idea? Yes, we know that about, and we do that with children. How can we do that with adults too? We see the struggle. I notice the I wonder if, or would you like an idea, or I was thinking about, invites that collaboration, and it gives respect to that person, and it gives permission to that person to say, no, I got it. Nope, just give me another minute, right? It's so respectful, right? Okay, so allow mistakes so that people can figure them out, right? Different if it's a safety thing, then you got to step in a little faster, right? I feel like that doesn't need to be said, but if it's a safety thing, right away, you got to go in. Okay, next, describe a situation. Ask, how did that feel? What would you do differently? So this goes back to the I notice part, right? I notice, and then you describe the situation. Following up with, how did that feel? What would you do differently? What would you do the same? What are you working on? What's the struggle? What's easy about it? Asking those questions that that promote and kind of ignite self-reflection. Yeah. Okay, and then believe in the power of pregnant pause. I like this little round raccoon, makes me laugh. Okay, so believe in the power of that pause, that engaged pause, right? Where there may not be an answer right away. And that's okay. That's also hard for those of us who activate and we want to get to the answer and get to the solution right away. That can be, that can be brutal to just pause and know that this may not be figured out today, right here, right now. Pause. Again, if it's a safety thing, right. Okay, deep breath. Now, have you ever been in a position or have ever found yourself feeling like, okay, I give up. This coaching relationship, this dynamic, this person is not working. This is not working out. I want to give up, right? Okay, so we've been talking about so much of building relationship and building trust and coaching to solution and, the self-evaluation, all that. Yes, yes, yes. And sometimes we find out we've done all of the work to make sure that it's a fit motivationally. They dig our mission, they dig our vision, they're behind our core values. And we do all the work to make sure that happens. And sometimes we might be mistaken, or it turns that it's not a fit, right? And we might feel like we give up. So a leader that I listened to recently, his name is his name is escaping me. It'll come to me in a minute. Anyway, he spoke about you got to know how to let go quickly. Like, you got to know how to dismiss or fire or release quickly. Now, with all that being said, it's important to know and important to give respectful time and consideration and tools to the person that you've hired, because you both are in agreement that we are entering into this working relationship, knowing and believing that I'm here to support you to do your best work, right? And that person is there to do their best work and support the vision and mission and the values of the school, right? And sometimes it comes to the point where it's time to say goodbye. So, one, have you documented every single thing? Have you had those coaching conversations and come up with plans and goals, right? That's the important piece. Have you built the relationship so that that person feels safe and has trust with you to be open and honest with you, right? So here we go. It says, I cannot help you if you cannot be involved to help yourself. When you're ready, I will be here to help. There's no more me throwing the ball. That sounds pretty tough, doesn't it? But consider, gosh, his name is it's right on the tip of my tongue. I'll put it in the notes section, okay? Okay, so it is true that we can't help if that person is not ready to receive and is not involved to help themselves, right? We can encourage self-reflection, but we can't do the self-reflection, right? So when they're ready, and we can even say the self-reflection part is necessary, and when you're ready, I can be here to help, right? There's no more me throwing the ball. That kind of goes along with, that's not me doing the self-reflection, because you can't do their self-reflection. You see what I mean? So it may be that you have a difficult conversation that is kind of like, what's the obstacle here? What is the victory? Is the behavior that you want to see in the classroom or in their work. The obstacle is that it's not happening, or you dig deeper and you find out a different obstacle. And then, do they have the tools? Do they have the techniques to overcome that obstacle to get at that victory? And then, how do they feel about it? How do you feel about it? In your own self-reflection, what is your victory? Do you have an obstacle? Do you have the tools and techniques to overcome your own obstacle to get at that victory? Talk about vulnerability. Is doing your own self-reflection as a leader and your part in the relationship with someone who is struggling in their work, right? So some final thoughts are these. One, confidentiality. So what is said here stays here. That's so, I can't tell you how important that is, right? And it may be that you have a work friend who really wants to know, or, oh, I saw you go into a meeting with, well, so we're going to go back to our 4 agreements, right? And the 4 agreements inform the importance of confidentiality. So being mindful of that, right? Hold their dignity, right? Give space to make mistakes and to grow, to make mistakes and figure out how to correct and to right, right? Next, protect their dignity. What can you do to protect them while they are figuring out how to do better and how to learn and how to grow, right? Often when there's a coach and learner relationship, there's a place that growth is necessary to happen, right? So in protecting their dignity, we give them the space to be honest and to work and to struggle and to fail even and try again, right? And then the last final thought here is to support and encourage. And our support and encourage is going to look different for every single person, right? Check out this question that I've learned kind of recently about support, and consider, how does this sound different? How can I support you versus, What does support look like for you in this moment? Notice the difference. And going forward, just try it out and check it out. What does support look like? And then how can I support you? They're different, and the nuance is subtle, right? So how can I support you kind of brings the, oh, I'm the savior and you need me and I can fix and make everything better. And different than what does support look like, which lets that person really dictate and guide moving forward. What does support look like? Because support might be different than the support that you were planning on giving. That could be a surprise. Okay. And then encourage. Notice and give praise that is descriptive and not evaluative. Same with children. When we give descriptive praise, descriptive affirmation, we give an opportunity for them to build an inner voice that gives affirmation even when we're not there. When we give descriptive affirmation and descriptive praise, it allows them to not grow dependent on the opinions of other people, right? To do the work that they are proud about, even when there's not an audience, right? Okay. So remember, excuse me, remember those words we wrote down forever ago about your favorite boss, your favorite leader? Remember that? So flip back in your workbook, find that. So here's my last thing for you today. So pick your top 3, circle them, and then we're going to set an intention. Okay. So take a minute, find the words that you use to describe your favorite boss, your favorite supervisor, your favorite leader. See that? Got it? And then pick your top 3 and set an intention. What is your intention? How do you plan to be more like that? How can I be an inspiration? How can I offer challenge with grace? How can I, whatever it is that you would use to describe your favorite boss, how can I do more of that? So pause, write that down, set your intention, and come back when you're ready. Okay, now you're back and you're finished with episode 2. So we're almost there. So you've got 3 more to come. I hope very much that you take some things that you learned today, because remember, the adult brain, if you put it into action right away, right, that you put something into action that you learned from this webinar as soon as possible in the next, maybe today or maybe tomorrow. So if you'd like to just pause and write down what's your intention, what do you plan to do, what's your goal, do that. And then when you come to the 3rd episode, there'll be an opportunity to reflect back on that. Okay. All right. So until next time, thanks for joining me, and good luck with it all.